All right, welcome everybody to our March 12th regular council meeting. I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the land at which we're gathering on as the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And just want to acknowledge that on the weekend, Comox First Nation did have a treaty vote, which not only had a great turnout, but also passed. So they will be moving on through the treaty ratification process and wishing them the best on their path to self-determination. We do have a proclamation today. It's my honor to claim today World Down Syndrome Day in the city of Courtenay. And as Canadians, we embrace both our similarities as well as our differences, knowing they make us stronger. Courtenay is proud to recognize and support individuals with Down syndrome and their families. And again, with that, I'm more than happy to proclaim today World Down Syndrome Day. And with that, we have no late items that I'm aware of. And we'll move into regular council minutes from February 26th. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, seeing none, we'll pass those unanimously, and we will move on to 4.1.1, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Carbett.
Thank you. Through the mayor and council, our manager of development planning, Jamae Sheely, is going to introduce a report on antenna system applications and process policy DS02.
Thank you. Currently, the city of Courtenay does not have any policy or direction on managing applications for antenna systems when they come to the Development Services Department. The proposal before you sets out the relationship between the governing body, the federal jurisdiction, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, as well as the statutory requirements for consultation. And this is for the proponents, such as a telecommunications company, to consult with both local governments as well as the public. So the policy itself sets out things within the preview of a local government. We can communicate our preferences with respect to location, design, and the public consultation process, as well as procedures for taking in applications and related fees. The development of this policy involved research based on best practices in other jurisdictions. It included consultation with proponents, as well as internal departments that may be most effective, such as fire and IT. And both of those departments confirmed that there are service gaps within our community. This policy also aims to harmonize the requirements put in place by the federal government and to set out clear direction for both the industry when they make application, staff in processing those applications, as well as for the public and what they can expect in terms of communications, and to help council form their response in terms of a statement of concurrence or not. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Excellent, thanks very much. And starting with Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the staff report. I know that we talked about this during an application maybe over a year ago, so really happy to see this coming forward, and the thoughtfulness and the staff report laying out quite clearly our responsibilities. I guess unsurprising because I brought it up at the time, and also when we've spoken about the fees and charges bylaw, and I see that if this passes, the next steps would be for the zoning bylaw to come back and the fees and charges bylaw to come back. I am I guess a little curious around on the second page of the staff report when it speaks to application process and fee, the fee of $2,500. And I appreciate that you laid out who these potential proponents would be, mostly multinational telecommunication firms. So curious if staff can speak to if there was any kind of comparative analysis around what other like-for-like fees would be for antenna applications.
For the question to the councillor through the mayor, As part of our analysis and the preparation of the policy, we did do a bit of an environmental scan, particularly to your question on fees. And the answer is the fees vary broadly from $250 up to $5,000 here on the island. So for example, Ladysmith is at $250, Cumberland's $1,500, Campbell River $5,000, Comox Valley Regional District is $2,500. The regional district of the Nanaimo is $4,000. North Cowichan's $1,000.
Okay.
So I based the fee in terms of looking at these numbers as well as gain feedback from our senior leadership team through discussion.
Okay. I can have a follow-up, Mayor, just on that. I know that we had passed a motion recently around asking staff to come back on a review of potential revenue streams. And I believe that we had had conversations around fees and charges more broadly. And so I'm wondering if the plan, again, under other considerations on page 2 around the fees and charges bylaw coming back to council with amendments, if that will be done at the same time as the review of the other fees and charges, and if we've thought about how this amount, the $2,500, given what we've heard from staff in terms of the real broad spectrum of fees across the province, if that's considered within the lens of potential revenue streams. So I don't know who would answer that, but
Ms. Wade.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Jolicoeur. Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, we are reviewing all our fees and charges for the department. And so we'd be looking to doing the fees and charges amendment come the fall. Was looking at some of our other processes and also recognizing in some of our fees and charges, we don't have some fees currently that we'd like to add as well. And so we will be doing that process, but we do have it scheduled for the fall.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Excuse me. Thanks for the presentation. I guess I'm curious as to the process that we've laid out here, the new one. How does that differ from the old one, like in time wise? Like the last one that went through, we of course we saw it come through council, but I wonder like how long did that take for staff to move that through at your end? And then looking at this new one, would that add a bunch of time or would it be more streamlined? Or what are your thoughts on the difference?
Ms. Wade.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Fish. Yes, so we did not have a policy. So we've been working with best practices and working with the industry in regards to that. And so this would actually streamline the process more because now we have clarity in the process and we would have the policy that we could follow. So it would definitely help in increasing the speed of the application process.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And then also, I guess, one of the main concerns, I think, when we talk about cell towers, I'm not actually familiar with a lot of cell towers in town and I don't generally notice them, but are there communities where they're noticing cell towers everywhere that are unsightly?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Fish, one of the things I believe in the policies, we also talk about other communities have actually asked them to be designed like to be a tree or a church steeple, or so there's creative things we can do, which we've got noted in the policy as well. And other municipalities have asked for that to be done, and working with the telecommunications provider, we can certainly work towards those things.
That's great. Well, there's no shortage of frustration with cell coverage in Courtenay. I think everyone at this table understands that. So I wouldn't want it to be overly onerous. And I did have some concerns about the fee. Just is it a realistic fee? If someone wanted to put up 4 towers, would that be too much money? But I'm not in the industry, so I don't really know. And I trust you guys to figure that out. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, through the Mayor. One of the critical components for a valid process that council could stand on and make a decision on is that there was a process, and we followed the process. Because some people agree, some people won't agree, but if we have a regularized, standardized process that council can say, no, we believe in this process and the outcome is X, and we provide concurrence. Because without concurrence, it doesn't mean the project stops, but it actually spins off an application to another process. And so good, reliable communication. Some people see it as sort of essential, but there are two important components. One is economic development, the other is public safety. So convenience for people in their house is also extremely important, but from the public interest, it's those two components. And so in order to facilitate council dealing with input, because in some cases it can be controversial, we often recommend a very standardized, consistent process so council can make reliable decisions. So the report that staff have come forward and the policy is pretty tested in other jurisdictions. It's quite similar to that. So I just really wanted to say thank you and also thank council for giving us that direction previously. And we hope that this process will allow these applications to proceed in an orderly fashion because of the public safety and economic development implications.
And you had a pull up, Councillor Frisch?
Just happy to move the recommendation there.
I did have,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you right.
unfortunately, what's on the screen is not what's on your piece of paper. I did have Councillor Jolicoeur ready to go in just because it is different. So I'll pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Happy to move the council approve the antenna system application and process policy DS-02 dated February 28th, 2025. And that council directs staff to prepare the bylaw amendments for zoning bylaw number 2500, 2007 and fees and charges bylaw number 1673, 1992.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. And I think one of the things really from those looking to do cell towers as well is that certainty coming into a process. So the fee is one thing, but having that certainty that there's something that they can actually work towards in a reliable, consistent way is absolutely critical. And I'm not sure if I've sent it to our CAO, but I know I've sent pictures of tree cell towers from many places that I've visited because they are definitely something that there's all sorts of ways you can make a cell tower less like a cell tower. So really glad that those things have been contemplated. And with that, all those in favor? And that motion passes. And we'll move on to liquor license application 2403 for 244 4th Street. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garber.
Again, Ms. Shealy will carry forward on this application and available for council.
Did it turn on? There we go.
Is it on now?
And after you speak, you can leave it on, and then if people have questions, you can, because there may be questions.
Thank you. The application before you is from the Glensley Brewery Company, located here in our lovely city in our downtown at 244 4th Street. It's an application for an existing establishment that has an existing and valid manufacturing license, allowing for the production and consumption of alcohol in their premises with a capacity up to 280 persons. What else can I tell you here? So there's no change to the business hours being proposed. They still remain from 9 a.m. to midnight. What is proposed to change or being requested to change is an increase in the people capacity. That would change, if approved, from 280 people to 360 people. This is a difference of 80 people within the same establishment. Again, the building and the use is in compliance with our zoning bylaws. There was a public consultation process conducted as per our current standards for this application. It involved notification, a mail out notification to area businesses and residents within 30 meters of the establishment. It also included posting a notice on the city's webpage for 2 consecutive weeks. In response to the comment period, we received 1 letter of support, and I believe that's council has received that information. And that letter was in favor of the application, demonstrating the importance of having more public event facilities in our city. The staff recommendation on this application is in support.
All right, thanks very much. And are there any questions or comments? Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to speak in support of this application. This is a thriving business that provides a gathering place for many people in the community, and they've made their facilities available for community activities such as World Radio Day, which took place recently, and the new facility that is going to be converted into customer space was in fact made available for the local community radio station. So I think it's a good use of the facility, and these have been this is a valued business in our community. That site was a gas station when I first moved here. It's been a number of things over the years, but I think it's been most successful as the current use as basically a neighborhood pub. So happy to see this move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Yeah, I think it was an inkjet place when I moved here with parrots or something, a different type of liquid. I don't believe inkjet is what it was 20 odd years ago, but with that comment, I'll see if somebody wants to move the recommendation. All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. We'll move on to the review of policy impacts of relocating homes older than 15 years, and I'll pass it over to staff. Mr. Garber.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, so a report that's in response to council's receiving of a delegation that questioned the application of existing bylaw and policy we have. Mr. Paul Preston from our building division is going to introduce this report.
Through the mayor to council. So this report, as Mr. Garbutt said,
Maybe just bring the microphone a little bit closer. We do have councillor online, so just so he can hear as well.
This report is in response to the delegation that came forward to council back in July of last year, looking to amend the building bylaw to relax or to remove the 15-year restriction on moved-in buildings to within the city of Courtenay. When the bylaw was originally brought forward to council, several considerations were taken into account. Initially, from a building perspective, is the life safety aspects of the building. So the function of the building itself, and also the other key aspect is the OCP objectives, particularly around energy efficiency and carbon emissions, which tie into some of the newer buildings and the requirements that have come into effect. Other factors that we also considered was the code changes and the cost effectiveness of this, and particularly with environmental loads. So the older the building is, it's built to a lesser standard than the loads that are considered today. As of the 10th of March, or Monday, our seismic requirements had just now changed yet again. So this is a considerable cost effect on moved-in buildings that are built to an older age that had none of these restrictions on them at the time. So when you start looking at cost effectiveness, if you have to do seismic upgrades, this is a significant amount of money, and it creates real challenges for people moving these buildings in. So that was a major consideration. When we did bring it forward, the MIA core bylaw actually is that what our bylaw is based on is more restrictive than what staff originally proposed. So we looked at where would be a good timeline in which to implement a time limit. And so the 15 years puts us back into the 2006 code, and there's significant changes at that time for building envelope, where seismic requirements change, snow loading. So what that does, it relieves the challenges for homeowners bringing buildings in because they weren't supposed to meet the code of the day. So this makes life a little easier. And by continually having this 15-year time restriction, we then start seeing buildings built to higher standards. And over time, you'll then also meet your OCP objectives with the energy efficiencies and emission control requirements that, that's another directive from staff that are still looking into of where we will deal with zero carbon step code. I think I'll finish there and leave it open for questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for the brief report there and the recommendation that you brought forward to us. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the reports and for clarifying why we have this requirement in the bylaw. I guess the thing that occurs to me is that there may be circumstances where a building older than 15 years has been renovated, has been well kept, has been brought up to code. And I'm wondering why it isn't possible to have in the exemptions in the bylaw some sort of a process whereby an inspection could allow such a building to pass muster. I guess I'm aware of the challenges we have with housing and this being also a viable business operation, that the moving of older homes and basically the rejuvenation of them. And I think we've seen some pretty good homes that have been brought to our community in that way. So why is it not possible to have some sort of a process to exempt a building from the bylaw if it basically passes muster?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hilliam. It gets quite challenging for building inspectors to look at existing buildings and renovations. And the other thing is you can have buildings coming out of unpermitted areas. So there will be no trace or no paper trail of what has been done to the building. A lot of the renovations don't actually get into any significant seismic upgrades, loading. And this is where it becomes challenging. It opens also, concerns for liability for the city with respect to looking at these older buildings. So at this time, we don't actually look at the building itself. We take it that it was built to the code of the day. What we do look at is what all the work is carried out under permit, which would then actually meet current code. So it is really challenging with looking at old buildings.
Yeah, subsequent, Councillor Hillian?
Well, it just occurred to me that if we had some sort of a way for people to apply for an exception and make it a user pay system whereby they paid for all the inspections that were necessary and came up to code, even though it was an older building, whether that wouldn't be a viable way that didn't take a lot of extra work on the city's part and enabled older homes to come here if in fact they were in good shape.
Through the mayor to Council Hilliam. The thing is a lot of the work is covered. So to inspect something, you have to see what you're inspecting. So if work is covered, then we wouldn't look at approving it or not. And this has always been a challenge for all building departments with respect to work that is being done without permit. How do you prove that? You're almost asking somebody to start pulling their building apart so you can actually see what they've done. And it gets incredibly complicated.
Oh, Ms. Wade. Got to find the right one. Look at that. Ms. Wade.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. I just wanted to expand upon what Mr. Preston has said, and part of it is so when a building is moved, it has to come into compliance to the code of the day. And then within the code of the day, there's always the option to do what they call alternative solutions, which is a way of them hiring a professional to do other ways to bring the building into code. So they have that option. So there is some flexibility, I'll use the term. But that's how that would be approached. But the issue is when you move the building and the building comes, it's kind of an unknown and it's transferred. And so the building has to come to code and meet that code so that it is compliant for health and safety. And the other issue is that if we're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and we're trying to do building performance, that's all part of in the OCP policies. And so our building codes establish that so that we're meeting those objectives of the OCP for building performance and greenhouse gas emissions.
All right, thanks, Ms. Wade, appreciate that. And Councillor Frisch. Oh, no, actually, Councillor McCollum, so close.
It's confusing. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, there's quite a few factors to weigh here in terms of, the priorities of the city and public safety and building stock and, how it changes the neighborhood when a lot's redeveloped. And then, recognizing that people want to have some of their own control when it comes to making decisions around how they do development. So there's a few factors to weigh here. But one question I had that wasn't necessarily provided in the report is just how common it is in the city. I mean, especially, it occurs to me that it may have been more common in the past. I imagine that it's becoming less economically attractive to, put a house on a lot that has so much development potential. Most of the lots in the city of Courtenay now that you could put a moved home on, you could also put a fourplex if you're starting from scratch. So it occurs to me that maybe we're going to tease this apart very carefully and it will apply to very rare circumstances. So I just want a sense of how common it is for us to receive a building or like a building permit application for this type of redevelopment.
Through the mayor to Councilor McComb, I know that Mr. Preston has actually done some research on this and could speak to this.
He looked very eager to speak. So, Mr. Preston.
Through the mayor to council. So since 2007, we've issued 26 permits over the last 17 years for relocated buildings. So that averages about 1.5 over per year. So last year we issued none. 2023 we issued 2, and 2022 we issued 1. So the volume that we're seeing of these buildings is very small anyway. And as council has mentioned that I believe it's not as lucrative as it used to be. When you start looking at the cost of a lot is around about $400,000, and you buy the house for like $150,000. You've got to move it. You're then subject to any renovations to that. So the threshold between buying a brand new house on a lot at say $650,000, and you're not even comparing apples to apples, because you're buying a house that's meeting a higher energy standards to something that you're trying to bring up, or at least make it usable on the lot, depending on the age of the building. The older you get, the more problematic it gets. So I don't think it's as viable as it ever used to be.
Yeah, that's helpful and definitely aligns with what I would have expected. The other question I had is when a property is redeveloped this way and someone turns around and goes to sell it, is there any way for, like a new, like the purchaser to know if the home has been moved? Because, I mean, essentially they're buying a home, say if it had downstairs redeveloped and it's got a new downstairs and an old upstairs, they don't really realize that there hasn't really been a proper building inspection on half the house. Is that? Because we don't inspect the old part, from what I'm understanding.
Through the mayor to Councillor McCollum. That's the only way you would know is the permit that would be issued is a relocation permit. So a buyer would have to do their due diligence to come into the city, look at our records or archive our records to see what was on what was permitted. So typically we would it would be noted that it's a relocated building, and we would also have plans on file with footings, foundations and excavation.
Right, so in a property disclosure, there's no requirement to highlight that wasn't a typical build.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
From a property disclosure aspect.
Okay. Okay, yeah, thanks for that.
Right, thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the report. I think members of the public will be interested. There was a quite clearly articulated case from a young family on how our current bylaw restricted some of their home ownership dreams. And so I'm happy to see the staff report. Do you have a few clarification questions? One of them was what Councillor McCollum had just asked, but I am interested in knowing, because one of the primary arguments in the staff report are related to objectives that we have in the OCP and goals under specific objectives. And so I guess I'm curious, because one of the options is no age restriction. I think there's a third option for council to consider around setting a specific age restriction. What are the potential impacts on the OCP goals? And are there any mitigating factors to manage or to reduce those potential impacts?
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. The implications of not having any restrictions on is that the buildings will continue to add to your existing buildings, and you wouldn't meet your energy requirements or the emission requirements without actually having to then have some form of retrofit or work after the fact. So staff have, put forward that, to avoid going down the issues of your objectives and policies of for incentive programs and things. If you're not adding to your existing stock that need to be, you wouldn't need incentive programs. So if you remove the date, you would always have to have something or some form of how you're going to retrofit these buildings at some stage. And then the older the building is, the more retrofit you do, the more environmental impact you have, because you then got to remove or dispose of the materials at some stage. So the environmental aspect is complicated. But the higher the efficiency buildings that you have, you're going to meet your objectives for your objective in for existing buildings to be upgraded in higher energy water efficiencies. By putting them bringing in newer buildings, they will be existing buildings, but they'll be meeting that requirement. So that's why we would not, advocate by, reducing the date. The building code, it in March introduced step 3, and obviously the city's at step 4. Well, you won't see a building, if we kept the 15 years, you won't see a building moved in until 2039. That'll actually just meet that requirement, which is quite a way behind where the city is at the moment with their where the new construction. So we're setting a different tier for new construction and a way of bringing old buildings in to meet a lower standard.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think I'm fine with that we are encouraging the industry to meet the requirements of our time, which is the standards we've set out through the step code and the zero carbon step code as well. So just with that last point, there is no mechanism for local government to encourage or incentivize or force homeowners to retrofit their homes to meet the current standards that we have, other than if and at the time that they pull a building permit for renovation. Is that correct?
through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. If I'm understanding your question correctly, that there isn't a mechanism to enforce somebody to actually upgrade their building. The only time you would the building would be upgraded is depending on the work that they're doing and whether it's required to have a building permit. So if it's within the scope of the permit of what they're doing, then it'll be upgraded to the standard of the day. But you can't make somebody update a building just because you want to, and it's always been applied that, you know, the code of the day applies to the building, and any work that's under permit, it would be to that code. Hence, so the building going on the foundation, all the foundation work and everything underneath is today's standards, but you can't actually upgrade that building and say, well, okay, you got to meet today's code. Well, you just will not have brought it in because you'll just never achieve it.
Right. Yeah, that was my understanding. I just wanted to get the clarity. There's the majority of our housing stock. There's no way for us to actually encourage them to get to the standards we want to, other than the new ones. But my last clarification question, in the staff report, you've highlighted 3 examples of other municipalities, and one speaking to the year component. I think it was Ladysmith, perhaps. Maybe it was in one of the other ones. Had you found in your environmental scan any municipalities in BC with a longer age restriction?
They're through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. I didn't see any others that had a specific age restriction, apart from Ladysmith, but a lot of them now are utilizing structural requirements. So some of that's going to deal with that directly anyway. But Ladysmith was the only one that actually had a 15-year requirement on, and they've now made theirs basically more restrictive than that.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur, for that. And I guess, like, when we're talking about encouraging people to do things, I mean, there's things like the Energy Navigator, or, you know, those types of things, grants for heat pumps. But when it comes to the actual structural side, it's far more complicated, I guess. So appreciate that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm trying to keep in mind that this is such a small issue in the big scheme of our city, being only 1 to 1.5 buildings per year. And I'm not the most adverse to risk. Those of you who know me well, I guess it was my step grandmother or my grandmother-in-law used to climb up a set of stairs that looked more like a ladder, you know, with 6-inch treads, and she was in her 80s. And I guess I'm wondering what the risk is to the city if a house gets brought in, it's got stairs that aren't to code, its roof maybe doesn't hold up to some big snowfall, something happens. Where does that leave the city? Are we really at risk of being liable for those incidences?
Wade?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fish. So when a building comes in, it would have to meet whatever the building code is of the day and do it. So that would be your check on that piece. The issue that staff is bringing forward that is we're trying to honor the OCP policies, and if we're trying to move towards energy, our greenhouse gas targets, our building targets, and how we're trying to do building performance, that's why we're suggesting the 15 years and being consistent with what we brought into the building bylaw. But council does have the option, we've laid them out with the 3 options you can do. It's just we're trying to be consistent with our OCP and some of the strategic priorities that council has.
Thanks, and I appreciate that. You also mentioned in the report that the last 2, maybe it was the last 2 houses were quite newer houses sold by, I don't know if it was Nickel Bros or the other company in town. And I have the site up here. There's a lot of houses for sale. Do you have any idea, like, if the market does in fact have lots of sub 15-year-old houses for sale, or is it like there's just a few, and in fact most of them are older than 15 years? Is that something you guys looked into?
Through the mayor to councillor Fish, we have looked at the age of building supply as part of our complete communities assessment, where we've looked at, like greater than 15 years and 30s, because that is what informs, you might remember the heat map that we had that said these are the areas that are primed for redevelopment. So we have used age of housing. I can't give you the exact number off the top of my head right now, unless Mr. Preston has it.
And sorry to interrupt, I more meant this stock actually for sale, houses being moved, are there,
Oh,
are
the
there,
actual-
are there lots of newer houses for sale that are being moved around? Being sold as just a house?
I don't think there's many, but I think Mr. Preston has a list.
Through the mayor to councillor Frisch. At the time of the delegation, I did look on the website for buildings within the 15-year period, and there was 4 on there just sold out of the Lower Mainland for $95,000, which were only 2016, which were 8-year-old buildings. As I indicated in the
yeah, you just have to speak a little,
As I-
use the outside voice if that's possible.
As I indicated in the report, I believe that you'll start to potentially see more houses of that sort of age based on the opportunities that SHMU is now provided for densification. So I think that the housing stock is going to be more newer than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was my feeling as well, with more redevelopment going on. And so our bylaw actually doesn't seem overly restrictive in my opinion. So I see some other lights on. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, through the mayor. Just to council in the big picture, and your staff have enacted your direction, whereby we've established very high building performance standards, and we have taken the provincial direction on all matters forward, and in some cases we're ahead of that. So to consider items on a case-by-case basis or exemption, that is certainly an option. You received feedback during the drafting of the OCP as to why did we want to be at certain building and performance standards, and that was relative to public safety, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, etc. The fact is, the moved on buildings that are less than that kind of threshold area, they don't meet those standards. And so we as staff enact the big picture strategic direction of council. And so that is why the rules have been drafted and been updated based on since sort of some slight changes in 2018. So those are the matters in front of us, and the director has said, council can provide us that direction, but the rationale as it relates to the entire community is to have a building performance at a specific level, have public safety and seismic issues addressed at a specific level. And then the question that was raised previously about the embedded carbon, there's information in that regard. But that is why the rules have been drafted, and that's in response to make sure that we actually have a continuum of consistency from a regulatory perspective. And that is absolutely critical to have that sort of credibility. So that's the background there. And then I think the conversation in and around what's possible, I think staff were there for that conversation. I just wanted to connect the dots from the strategic perspective with the big picture of the entire community at hand, and where we are in what people are required to when they build inside this community, and that has been translated into moved in buildings.
Thanks very much, Mr. Garbutt. And I think Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor McCollum have spoken already. So I just had maybe one point of clarification. You know, if we keep the 15 years as it is right now, based on what I'm hearing, that already creates an exception. Basically, this is what a new building has to perform at, but we're going to make this an exception for a building at this age, as long as it's less than 15 years old. I mean, it has to meet some of the codes, but some of the things doesn't have to, and maybe just getting that clarity that if it's 15 years old and it gets moved from point A to point B within the city, or from outside the city to within the city, how does that compare to a building that may have been built last week next door to it? Does that make sense?
To the mayor. So a building built 15 years ago now would be under the 2006 BC building code.
Mhm.
So obviously we're in the 2024 building code. Staff ideally would have liked to get into the 2012 code because there was a lot better, some harsh standards that were introduced that we thought were beneficial to the occupants of the building from a life safety perspective. But a compromise by looking at this continual 15-year age, I think within 2 years you're going to be into a newer code. So what you're doing is you're bringing in a building that is guaranteed to be of 2x6 construction, where anything well, within the 98 code, you could have had 2x4 out of the mainland, lower insulated walls. So by setting up that 15 years keeps you into that code, you're already bringing in a building that is going to meet a higher energy efficiency. Nothing to the the levels of the step code that is generating that you are seeing a new building today. But I'm not sure if
Well, I think, yeah, that answers it for me. So basically, by leaving that 15 years in there, or even if we said 2012 or 2007, whatever year we choose, we're saying that that gives an exception for those buildings, because again, you're not going to swap out 2x4s by 2x6s, because it's practically impossible. So and definitely economically not advisable. So that clarifies that in my mind. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. I'm actually really grateful for this conversation, because I think, at least on my town council, there hasn't been a ton of policy-based conversations that we've had that I think have really challenged our understanding of the goals and objectives that are in the OCP, and what I see as a climate justice issue as it relates to people's lived experience, their family dynamics, maybe their skill sets, maybe they're a builder, maybe they're a contractor in their work life, and their financial picture. And I think that with SHMU and the financial situations that many of our families and our community members are experiencing, I'm of the air that we should be considering all options for increasing housing stock, while also addressing some of the life and safety issues that are quite clearly articulated in the staff report. I do think this is one of those examples, though, where we set some pretty strong goals, and we're making headway on those goals, specifically around new builds. Whereas I think this is really challenging our thinking around how we support people from all economic and family backgrounds. It's not up on the screen, but there was a third option in the staff report, and that's the one that I'm most interested in. And the staff report speaks, and you've mentioned it a few times, that 2006 was a pretty big change in the building code. And in particular, it speaks to some significant changes around life and safety. And so I guess getting to my question, looking at option 3, if we were to say 2006, given that that's the big area, and then maybe in 2 years when we get to that If we went with 2012, that would give us in 2027, we get to that 15-year mark. We can review it then. But if we went with 2006 building code, can you speak to that, what that would look like, and any kind of issues that staff might see with that as option 3 if we set 2006 as the year?
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. The concerns I see with setting a set date is it never progresses. Ideally, I would have liked to have seen the 2012 code, which would have reduced the age limit yet again even further, but I would have thought that was even more restrictive, that it was more restrictive. And by putting the age limit in instead of an actual year, I think is more advantageous because it continually works towards the goals of the OCP. It improves life safety of the buildings. So that would be my concerns by setting an age limit or a set year.
Oh, Ms. Wade, sorry.
Through the mayor, to Councillor Jolicoeur, I think one of the questions you're asking is if we want to sort of align with that life safety, what's the best from an environmental? I think what Mr. Preston's saying is that the building code of 2012 aligns best to where we're at. And so what we've used 15 years because that aligns better with the 2006 building code. But if we can, if we wanted to go to the 2012, then we could articulate that as well. I think I answered the question.
Yeah, 2012 would take us even further back. It would be 13 years rather than the 15. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning to it being more accessible than less. So I'll just leave it and let my other colleagues speak to that.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. And yeah, I mean, this is really getting to the crux of this balance of that restrictive amount, especially given what our outcomes we're looking for. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was just looking around, didn't see a lot of lights. Would you be willing to entertain a motion?
I might be able to. Councillor Cole Hamilton, I just wanted to confirm, sorry, you were just off the screen for a second, but I don't see that your hand is up. So with that, I think a motion would be appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Well, I'll just start by saying that I appreciate staff doing all this work. I will reiterate, this is almost, this look at this bylaw right now is probably for one family in the valley. It's never actually come up before. And I think staff have done a good job of striking a balance between our desires for higher efficiency and so on with the needs of some people to buy an older house and move it on site. So 15 years seems fair to me. So I'm going to move that council direct staff to maintain the existing wording of building bylaw number 3114, part 11, section 11.1.
All right, it's been moved in second. I do see staff have turned their microphones off, but I do have maybe one more subsequent, just as we started talking about those specific dates and say 2012 is the one that is most spoken about right at this moment anyways. And if it makes sense, if 2012 is kind of, you know, a bit of a line where we do 15 years, but maybe at some point we revisit this 15 years, or do we just say 15 years? And that, because it sounds like there's going to be a big change in 2 years. And then is there another big change after 2012 as we move forward? You mentioned Monday, I think, as another one. So, I mean, I guess 15 just kind of keeps it automatically moving forward. But I'll Mr. Preston, if you could hopefully make sense of that word salad I just threw out there. And
Mr. Mayor, 15 years is the balance, or what we consider was a fair balance between being over restrictive and too restrictive. The reason why I like the 2012 code is, you know, they made significant changes to smoke alarms and things like that. They got to be in every bedroom. It was identified that children weren't waking up to the smoke alarms. They were outside the building, so that, to me, that was, from a building perspective and life safety perspective, that, to me, that's, really important. But then I look at the balance of, okay, we're in the 2006 code. If we keep maintaining the 15 years, we're going to gradually improve our building stock that we do allow to be moved into the city on a continuous basis, and we don't have to keep revisiting it. What is also starting to get challenged, like Monday saw the seismic requirements change, but the 2024 code introduced radon. So all these new moved in buildings are going to have a 4-inch pipe stuck right up through them, because it's depressurization of the slab underneath the crawl space, but to get it out, you've got to put it through the building. So obviously when you get to newer buildings over time, that would already be in, because they would just cut the pipe off. So
Right. Okay. I think that answers it quite well. We've had a fairly fulsome discussion here. So we have a motion on the table. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And looks like motion carries. Those in against. And we have one against, Councillor Jolicoeur. All right. Thanks very much for that great discussion. And we'll move on to 4.2.1, the 6th Street Bridge project update. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the request for proposals process for the 6th Street Active Transportation Bridge, and to provide an estimate for the cost to construct the project and ways to fund the construction. Request for proposals was released to the contracting community on November 29th, 2024, in order to select a contractor for the construction of the 6th Street Bridge. The RFP closed on January 31, 2025, with 5 compliant bids received. Based on the results of the RFP, total expected cost for the project is estimated to be $11,165,000. Staff are seeking direction on how to proceed. I will now hand it over to Adam Pitcher, who will present some background information on the bridge options considered throughout the life of the project to help inform the discussion.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so we put together a quick slide deck just to take us through a bit of the history here. So a lot of the decision-making dates back to around 2020, when we originally reviewed these 4 options. So the 4 options that were reviewed back in 2020 were a bowstring bridge. Sometimes in the report, they're also referenced, it's also referenced as a pre-engineered truss. The second option is a Bailey bridge. Third option was a network arch bridge, and the 4th option was a cable stayed bridge, which is the bridge that we have proceeded through detailed design with and tendered to, and have recently tendered. So just taking you through some of the details here. So the first option was a bowstring bridge, and so it was studied but ultimately ruled out due to constructability concerns and aesthetics. Some of the biggest drawbacks there are it's high profile, which results in steep approach grades. And what that means, I think, in lay terms, is that it doesn't meet our all ages and abilities standard. So it makes the grades far steeper. The picture on the right, you would see like the ramps leading up to the bridge. It makes those ramps considerably more steep and not AAA. Significant staging areas. I mean, you can see the project or the picture on the left. That's roughly the area that we're looking at if you wanted to construct and install that bridge on in Sims Park, say, for example. So yeah, very significant staging areas are needed. It does have low transparency and poor aesthetics. And also for that to be installed without a crane, you would still need to use a crane, but it would be either push launched or barged into place on the river, which would ultimately mean more removal of trees in Sims Park. The second option we reviewed was a Bailey bridge. And this was also studied, but ultimately ruled out similarly to the constructability concerns noted in the first option. Again, it can't meet AAA requirements. It requires significant staging areas and is typically also push launched or barged into place. And also these Bailey bridges are typically used as a temporary solution. So they have substantial annual inspections to inspect the pins specifically on these bridges. So they're more viewed as a technical or sorry, temporary solution. The network arch that was reviewed, and that was, I think, second place in the options evaluation that we'll get to, but it had a higher aesthetic value for sure. Also like a signature structure. It is less constructible because it also does have impacts to the environment, requires a larger staging area, and was the most expensive bridge, but does meet our AAA requirements. And the last option was the cable stayed bridge. Again, this is the project that we proceeded through detailed design with, and we did tender. So the bids have come in at, in total, the project cost will be $11.1 million to construct. This was the selected option in the evaluation. Has a high aesthetic value. It is more constructible with less environmental impact. It can be built incrementally from either side of the river. Smaller staging areas required and also meets our requirements for AAA accessibility. Our options evaluation is shown there. So we reviewed the options through a few different lenses as far as structural considerations, environmental considerations, life cycle costing, constructability, the pathway grading, and user experience, as well as aesthetics. You can see the evaluation at the bottom, and the cable stayed bridge ended up coming out on top with the network arch being the second place finisher. So what we're showing here is some capital cost estimates. So what we did here is we took our cost estimates from 2020. And you see it's a big difference between 2020 and 2025. And so what we did is kind of reverse engineer our cost, assuming using our RFP results, and tried to do a little bit of a back calculation here. Now it's pretty rough calculation, but trying to provide some analysis of what the difference in costing might be across the four options based on the original 2020 cost estimates. And those numbers, I should say those numbers surely need to be reviewed as we go here, but we wanted to provide a little bit of context. With that, we're happy to take any questions. I should note we have Adam Langemeyer here to help us, and as well as our manager of procurement and risk, Scott Hainsworth, to help us as well. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks for the report, although obviously not the answers we were necessarily hoping for. While I'm waiting for some lights to come on, maybe one of my questions, when you talk about the slide that had the 11.1 million, and unfortunately we don't have this slide deck, so there was another slide that had that full matrix, because I was really hoping to relook at that. I couldn't find it in the report, but when we talk about that 11.1, that's like a very high degree of confidence that price is what we're talking about. And I'll turn your microphone back on.
Through the mayor, yeah, I think we have a high degree of confidence in those costs. I mean, we've had some preliminary discussions with the contractor or the preferred proponent about this, and working within the consulting team as well. So yeah, I think there's a high degree of confidence in that value, in that dollar amount.
Yeah, Chris, or Mr. Davidson.
Thank you for the question, and through the CIO to Mayor Council. Just to further illustrate the point, the other three numbers shown for 2025 numbers, we have significantly less confidence in. They're based off cost estimates from 2020. The cable stayed bridge 11.1 is based off an actual RFP result, the actual cost that we could proceed with to construct the bridge. The other three numbers for 2025 are very, very high level cost estimates.
All right, so that'd be very low confidence on the other three. Okay, yes. I really appreciate that as we get into this discussion, and I do see we have some lights on. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I don't know if you can take it back and come back with a better one, but I guess those are the numbers. I don't see any clarifying questions, or maybe you have some. And I didn't really, it seems pretty clear what the situation is. So I was just going to give some thoughts, if that's okay, Mayor.
That's what this part of the conversation is all about.
Thanks. You know, looking ahead, if we wanted to put this off, I wonder how much more it would be in 5 or 10 years. And the way things go, I bet it's going to be a lot more. The other thought I had today when I was mulling this over was, where are we trying to get to with this? And I think about our transportation system. I think about all our focus on, making an alternative to driving our cars around. And I think of the ability to reduce poverty by having that option for people and how important that is. And I think this project is such a kingpin part of our active transportation plan that it would be a real shame to just write it off and say we can't do it. So I really appreciate staff's hard work, and I'm at a place right now where I'm willing to support continuing on to try and get this built and see through our plan to provide that option for people. I also had the thought that we really only control a few really big pieces, I guess, for poverty reduction. One of them is providing, plenty of housing stock. But one of the biggest pieces is providing transportation alternatives. So when I think of how much money we spend on our cars and getting ourselves around and our children to school and all the rest, I think this is not going to seem like such a large number in a few years when we look back on the completed project. Thanks for letting me comment.
Thanks very much, Councillor Frisch. And I assume these questions are going to come up, but if not, I definitely have some financial questions. But having said that, I'm going to pass it over. Mr. Pitcher, do you want me to throw your mic on just so that it's on for answering questions? I'll throw that back on there for you, and I'll pass it over to Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for weighing in on that as well, Councillor Frisch. I share a lot of the same thinking around this. I would really prefer that we got a bid that was much closer in what kind of costing we were expecting, but weighing the alternatives, I don't expect that risking a significant grant toward this project by taking a different path is going to wind up with a solution that provides a lower cost in getting this infrastructure in place. And this is the key piece of our network. It connects north, south, east, and west. It connects all of the high schools with the west side of town. It's a critical piece in having safe and active transportation. And, we've been working towards developing this infrastructure in this community that dates back much further than my time on council. And it's hard to imagine that we're going to find a way of getting this built cheaper further down the road. I've never seen that happen in my time on council, where a project is delayed and the cost that comes back later on isn't even worse than the original. So I certainly share a lot of the same thoughts on this. I do have a few questions around how we proceed, because there are some details that we would still need to decide on. And one of them is around the value engineering piece in the report. To me, that makes a great deal of sense in any time that we're doing a major capital project, and this one would be pretty significant. What kind of timelines would we be looking at? Would that add a significant delay to the project? And just maybe if you could just provide a little bit more context into what we could expect to get out of a process like that and what it would add in terms of timing.
Mr. Pitcher.
Thanks for the mayor to Councillor McCollum. So like I mentioned earlier, we've been in, I would say, very preliminary discussions with preferred proponent at this point. And so specifically around value engineering, and really it's becoming less and less likely that there is much to value engineer, other than I think the piles specifically. And without getting into too much details on the pilings, there is some option there to revise design. So I mean, if the contract ends up being awarded, then we would work with the contractor and our design team to come up with, I guess, really a cost benefit analysis of if it will require a certain amount of design work and delay in the project, and then if it's worth our while. But the early returns on that excuse me, is that it might be worth our while. So that's the one item that we've landed on. You know, we had a chat with them about, you know, is there anything else in our design here that they felt like could be done cheaply or more efficiently or something like that, and the response back was no, not specifically.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll let others go.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I know just in speaking with members of the community, this is hard pill to swallow in terms of the costs. And I just went back over the last week to review the extensive work from staff over the last 10 years, if not more. I was talking to Councillor Haley and he's like, oh, it goes even further back than that. So, you know, and in 2022, extensive community engagement with Comox First Nation, the arts and cultural groups, business, the chamber, the Downtown Business Association, and community groups, and of course, in-house staff. So there's been a lot of thinking on this. And I agree with my colleagues that this is a vital part of the community that we're building for the future for all the reasons stated and more. And so I'm definitely supportive of seeing this project through, but I think given the context of the world, that it's important for us to talk about the costs. And I appreciate the overview of potential costs for the other options, the design options, which I reviewed from 2020 report. I guess my question would be particularly around, because I think there's a lot of pride in this community around this project, and that was recognized nationally in the grant we received from the Government of Canada. And so just in looking at all the detailed work that's been done in the design for the Cable Stay Bridge, there's a fair bit of placemaking, art components. How much of what was included in the grant could be carried over and therefore shared with the granting body that we'll be able to continue to do based on the application if we were to select one of these other three options?
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, that's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. So when we applied for the grant, we provided detailed cost estimates based on the Cable Stay Bridge itself. And so even how the 60%, off the top of my head, was it the 60% grant amount was landed at was 60% of our estimated costs for particular pieces of the bridge itself. So I wonder then if we go back to the granting authority, are they going to want us to break out specific details on a different bridge and then provide detailed cost estimates and kind of calculate it that way? So I'm unsure. I'm unsure of what the actual response is to that question, but I think they're going to want to see some details here for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess practically there's still site prep no matter which option we go to. There's still placemaking and art no matter which option we go through. And potentially some ecological impacts with tree removal, et cetera, no matter which option we go through. And I recognize that in the previous staff reports, depending on the bridge, there's potentially more or less of each of those things. And I guess one of my curiosities, and thank you for the slide deck, of course, the Comox Valley is engaged in accessibility work, so is the city of Courtenay. And was curious if you could speak a little bit more maybe in more lay person's terms, if we went with either the bowstring or the Bailey Bridge, which I think both don't meet the AAA accessibility standard, what that looks like in practice for people with accessibility and mobility issues.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. So yeah, the Bowstring Bridge and the Bailey Bridge do not meet the AAA standards, and that's basically it comes down to, like, I think the structural engineering of these bridges themselves, and they need to be built truly higher off the ground than our Cable Stay Bridge, which then creates the access ramps will then have to be steeper to kind of meet that elevation, if you will. So the early returns on this is that the grades to either the Bowstring or the Bailey Bridge would basically be double the steepness, so approaching 10%, which is far away from the 5% requirements for AAA. So you're truly looking at a steeper incline to reach the top of that bridge.
I could have a follow-up, Mayor, just on that last piece. I'm not an expert in design and engineering, but curious if there are design elements that could support individuals with mobility devices in that ramp on, I don't know if there's like landing, people can take a break and rest. Again, I'm not the expert, but are there engineering or design elements that could support individuals that need that additional support?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't know the answer to that as well. It's something we can look into. I mean, it certainly would come with cost and with impacts to the schedule as well. I mean, those ramps aren't particularly long, you know, as far as you know, the ability to say add a landing or things like that. So yeah, there would be some details to be worked out there for sure.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. Yeah, I think one of the questions I asked the staff way back when was like doing a basically a switchback or something like that, which would, again, doesn't necessarily take up more space lengthways, but obviously would impact both sides environmentally and with the business that's on the downtown city side. So, Councillor Cole Hamilton online.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I appreciate the questions about the accessibility factors on the bowstring and the Bailey. And it's good to hear there may be options like switchbacks that would allow for that grade to be reduced so that it is more accessible for all. I think it is, you know, sort of given the costs that we're looking at, I think it is incumbent upon us to consider what the other options are that are of lower cost. And speaking for myself, I was always an advocate of the base of the bowstring. I think it's interesting to see that it works out to be in $25 least expensive of the options. I am just interested in knowing whether staff feel that within the timeline that we have on the existing cable stayed RFP, if we have time to go back and give a bit of further consideration to the least expensive of the options, which would be the bowstring, and to work with the Government of Canada to see if that the grant that we have available could be applied to that structure of bridge rather than the cable stayed bridge. I realize it's a tight timeline, but I think we need to do our due diligence and make sure that people, the community, know that we've considered all options, including the, you know, the lowest cost available. And I'm just wondering if staff can comment on whether you believe that that is you know, at a high level possible to come back with a more detailed assessment of the bowstring bridge as the lowest cost bridge in comparison to the cable stayed before the cable stayed bid becomes expires. Whether we have the ability to confirm one that you know, that the Government of Canada would allow that change. And you can't speak for the Government of Canada, but would there be the time frame to consult with them? And also to provide us a bit more information on the bowstring prior to the expiry of the RFP on the cable stayed bridge.
The mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton. I appreciate the question. I think it's probably worth pointing out, like the cable stayed bridge design is truly gone through the entire detailed design process, and the details are well understood. The bowstring design, I mean, it was last we looked at that was back in 2020, you know, and we called it, I think at the time, like a detailed options analysis, which is, I suppose, a way of saying we don't know a lot of details about the bowstring bridge and its constructability and those types of impacts. So we're going to need some time to understand the details of any of the other options for that matter. So there's, and we can get to the RFP piece event here as well. But yeah, trying to understand what the details are and how a change in design would impact the constructability and would impact the costs as well is that will definitely take some time.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I do feel that we owe it to the community and to ourselves to understand the possibilities of the lower price bridge, the bowstring, and to try to do so within a time frame that still allows for an actual choice between that and the stayed bridge. So, I mean, I'll perhaps save my further comments to the point at which we get to a point of recommendations, but I just really appreciate staff's willingness to look back again at the other options to ensure that we're providing greatest value.
Sorry, on the piece with the government of Canada, I mean, they've been communicative with us over the last few weeks here for sure. So I mean, it's definitely something we can reach out and just understand, even at a high level, if it's something they're willing to entertain or not. I mean, it's they've been communicating with me over the last little while, so that's something we can do. And the RFP closing date escapes me. Chris, do you know that off the top of your head?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Through the mayor to council, we do actually have Scott Hainsworth present, who earlier said he'd be willing to speak to this portion. So thanks, Scott.
I'll turn the podium light on there for you, so you're good to go.
Excellent, thank you. To the mayor, to council. So the irrevocability period of the RFP and the proposals that were submitted to the city expires in and around March 31st or April 1st. So it's fairly precise. We had a standard 60-day irrevocability period for proposals within the RFP. The RFP closed on January 31st, which sets the revocability period around March 31st. So unfortunately, from today forward, not a lot of time.
And our next council meeting is April 2nd.
April 2nd.
So fair time is not on our side, so to speak, but Mr. Davidson.
Yes, thank you. If I could have one more comment, just on the accuracy of the cost estimates, and if we could develop even more accurate cost estimates. To bolster Mr. Pitcher's points, we will never approach the accuracy that we have with the 11.1 because that's the actual cost estimate to build it. We've completed detailed design. The other three cost estimates, we may be able to get slightly more accurate, and it's a good time to check in with the market if possible. We may be able to come back with some slightly more accurate pricing. But just to be clear, it will never be as accurate as the RFP result because we could award that and build the bridge proceeding from here.
Because there'd be a whole other RFP process, which would potentially give us different numbers as we have experienced so far. So I appreciate that clarification. Ms. O'Connell. Oh, hang on. There you go.
And just for council's consideration as well, in regard to something that may impact the timing, at the April 2nd meeting, you will be receiving the draft City of Courtenay engagement strategy, which includes recommendations that came from our community members, including equity deserving and seeking groups, in regard to how they would like to be engaged when decisions specifically affect their mobility, as well as other areas that are critical to them and their livelihood within the city. Understanding that in 2020, the current standards that we're about to bring forward to council did not exist, I would imagine that there would also be either a decision before council to not necessarily align in order to meet timelines, if that's the case, and or the timelines would be impacted in order to accommodate another round of engagement based on the new standards and the new policy and priority perspectives as directed by council. And that is at the next council meeting where those will come forward.
All right. And then I think just as point of clarification as well, my recollection when I had discussed the ability of doing switchbacks and stuff wasn't a positive one in terms of the impacts around it. And again, that was 5 years ago. So but my recollection, it was a tough part at that point. So with that, I'll pass it over to Councillor McCollum.
No, thanks, Mayor. Yeah. First of all, I want to appreciate the fact that staff took the time to revisit how we landed on the 4 cable stayed bridge to begin with, because I actually could not remember the details. What I recollected was that prior to getting the analysis, I was leaning on toward the bowstring, and then I couldn't really quite remember what the details were that had us move in this direction, but having this revisited makes it very clear why this was chosen. It was based on accessibility, and that that additional cost made a lot of sense in terms of the siting of the bridge and the functionality of it. And so hearing that again and, you know, recognizing that there's still a lot of uncertainty in all of the numbers except for the one that we're really contemplating. You know, I recognize that there's a potential, although I don't know how certain we could be on it in time to make a decision based on the RFP in front of us, that maybe we could accommodate a bowstring bridge with some type of switchback ramps, but it would not be the same level of functionality. A switchback is not great for people cycling. It's not great for pushing a stroller. Pedestrians are more likely to choose a route that's more direct. And, you know, we see that a lot in places where they have these overpasses over highways with switchbacks that people will often just kind of run across. Oops, thanks. Run across the highway instead of using the switchbacks to cross safely because, you know, sometimes you're looking for the path of least resistance. So, and hearing a 10% grade that's steep. That's not a slight change in the ramp. So, I mean, having this revisited, it just basically underscores that we did make a good decision on the cable stay, and it was not strictly about aesthetics. It was about the function of the piece of infrastructure that we're looking to build. And so in hearing that, it actually gives me a little bit more confidence that, you know, the decision is whether or not we're able to proceed given the increase in cost. And I don't know if revisiting all these options is, well, that we could get the information that we would need to be confident in a different decision at this point. And, you know, if we're adding in the design of switchbacks on top of this bowstring bridge that we don't have a clear cost estimate on, would we really realize a significant difference in cost? It's not super clear to me. So just wanted to provide my thinking on that. And yeah, I'll leave it to others because there's still lots of lights on.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCollum. And on that confidence of these numbers, just because I had my calculator open, it does look like the other ones have just kind of been using that same factor for the cable stayed bridge. So and maybe not, but I just wanted to confirm if that's the case.
Yes, excellent calculating. It's a linear interpolation to get those numbers. That's correct.
So no real effort has, and this is, I know it may sound negative. I don't want it to sound negative, but those numbers 1, 2, and 3 really at best are fair enough. Okay, I appreciate that. Sorry if my comment sounded a bit backhanded there, but really appreciate the clarification. Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to see if we could revisit the reasons for the cost escalation as explained by the successful proponent and the others. If we could just recap briefly why it's escalated as significantly as it has to give us this major sticker shock that we're dealing with now.
Excellent question. Thank you very much, Councillor Hillian. Through the State Audit Mayor Council. Unfortunately, we don't have good information on that still. The work we've been able to do to date has been focused on funding the bridge, analysis on historical decisions, and preliminary work towards value engineering. We haven't had a chance. We've had a very limited opportunity to do a deep dive on how our bids were so far off. We've had our consultants focused on minor redesigns and looking at options for value engineering. To do a deep dive on why the cost estimates are so, it's going to take us more time, unfortunately. I don't think we'd have that in time for April 2nd. It's going to.
Okay. That's difficult because it would be useful to know. I do want to give a bit of a recap because this is my 5th term in council, most likely my last. 4 councils that I've been on have supported this bridge, including the first time it came forward in the 2011, 2014 term. Quite a different composition in terms of ideological perspective and others as from today, but nonetheless, a project that was brought forward by citizens in the community, widespread support from many in the community, even though there were others who thought it was a bad idea and too expensive. Why do you want to build a bridge for bikes when we've already got a bridge? All those sorts of things. I want to speak briefly about much as I appreciate the active transportation benefits that this structure would bring. To me, the primary reason for doing it and for doing it at even at an escalated cost has always been the potential for the multi-million-dollar redevelopment of that section of the Courtenay riverfront. And I think that is a game changer for the city. It's a game changer for downtown business. Certainly a game changer for the business that owns the building supply that is likely to prosper significantly once they eventually move and that land becomes a combination of commercial, residential, and waterfront access for the greater community. So I think that this is worth doing. And I think it's worth doing even though it's a significantly escalated cost, and even though there will be a huge price to pay in terms of public opinion and electoral support in some quarters. I think we should do everything we can to economize if possible. And if there is a way to look at other options in the meantime to satisfy people that we have done some due diligence, then perhaps we should do that. But I agree with other comments that have been made that the price isn't going to go down if we wait. I think that the design makes sense. It's a signature bridge that will be a tourist attraction. It will be a point of pride for the city. And as I've said, it will not only provide vital active transportation link, but it will hasten and open up the development prospects of that significant section of our downtown that's currently underutilized in so many ways. So those are just my thoughts for now. And I did want to ask one question about financing, and that's what are the implications? Do we have the ability to, if we borrowed to finance it, to spread that borrowing out over a longer period of time, such as 30 years?
All right, Mr. Langenmeyer.
I'll share
You can use this. Oh, sure.
Yes, Councillor, we can spread the borrowing over 30 years if council so chooses. I like to use 20 years in all my examples of estimations because it's a balance. You know, some folks want that longer amortization period, some want it short. 20 is the mid ground.
All right. Thanks for those questions and your comments, Councillor Hilly. Much appreciated. And sorry, Councillor Jolicoeur, I've turned your microphone on.
Okay.
As well as Councillor Frisch. I'm going to turn yours off and back on if that's all right.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I've been really trying to stay solution oriented in this really challenging situation that we're in, but I will just share my opinion in follow up to Councillor Hilly, and I am quite disappointed with the shock of the price. And I actually felt it was really helpful to go back. I'm looking at in front of me here. I've got the detailed design analysis from December 2020. Class C estimates, where it says a range of -25% to +25% from these values should be considered in any planning. Anything else wouldn't be viable. So this is obviously significantly more than 35%. And yes, we're 5 years from 2020, but it is shocking that we did get a Class C estimate. And I would eventually like to hear a fulsome report back on why there is such a large discrepancy. Just to follow up on Councillor Cole Hamilton's comments, I guess I'm curious to know, and helpful, Scott, for you to share that we have basically until April 1st for this current RFP. What is the length of time that staff would need to get maybe it's a Class C estimate, because these are not Class C estimates for the other three, for Bowstring and Bailey Bridge, or maybe just one of them, like would that be possible between now and March 31st to get a more realistic number?
Good Mayor, to Councillor Joliker, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It's something we can work on for sure. So yeah, I mean, that's something we can look into and perhaps try and get back or get back for the April 2nd council meeting. Yeah, Class D. I mean, it's worth pointing out, we do not have a lot of detailed information about a bowstring bridge, right? So we would need to look at, some of its very, very high level detailed design considerations, what it would mean for, even just trying to come up with our cost estimates, what it costs to physically redesign the bridge as well, and then what it would cost then to construct as well. So yeah, there's a lot of details to be to look into there, but yeah, that's something we can do if you'd like.
And I do have one more question, probably to our finance staff, but in the staff report, you've highlighted a few options for us around ways to address some of the cost overruns for this project. There's some language there around debt, and then we speak to surplus. And I know that we don't get our actuals for this year until May, but what I didn't see here was it is highlighted in the current budget for how we're planning to pay for what was the 6.8 million. Is there an opportunity for us with the commitments we made to the province for the GCF funding to consider if there are other projects that we had assigned under that funding to this?
Yeah, it's growing community funds. Council gives the direction of where that has been spending. Back in 2023, they gave direction, and that's where our budget and the spending is allocated to. There's some items that haven't seen much movement, and it could be at council's discretion to make changes to that if they desire.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Joliker and Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I just have one clarifying question, and that's about coming back with more information. I heard you say you could do that. Can you do that in 10 business days? Because it sounds like this whole thing starts to fall apart anyways in about 2 weeks.
Through the mayor to Councillor Frisch, I would hesitate to commit to that right now. There's a lot of people who would have to contribute to this. So yeah, I think if that was the direction, yeah, we'd huddle with the team tomorrow and say this is what we need to do and see what answer comes back.
Yeah.
All right. And Mr. Garber, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to council. We would take council's direction and we would drop what we're doing and try to pick this up. In order to do that, it does rely on the ability for other third parties to deliver. So we would make every effort to do that. It's an incredibly important project, and but just recognize that this is a very challenging time to get that level of certainty. But we would do our very best.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's what I suspected. I think there's great value in sticking with not only our decision, but our decision-making process. I mean, you're going to drop everything, and we got a lot of other things going on, and go and refine these numbers, which, I mean, the most expensive to the least expensive was only different by $1 million. Who's to say it's not only going to be different now by $1 million? Labor could be a huge player in this. The cost of steel could be a huge player in this. There's a lot of steel in all these options. So yeah, I think the case to continue on our path and be predictable, and I think we have actually a winning design, and it's costed out. That's not a Class C estimate. That is in fact what it's going to cost us, barring anything super crazy. But yeah, I'm happy to move a motion if you want to.
We still have lights, so
thanks.
But I appreciate that, and again, I think to clarify, anything that we'd get within the next month or so would be Class D at best. Is that what I heard?
At best, if that's even possible, yes.
So we're not even talking Class C. So just as a clarifying point to what we're talking about already. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification and also highlighting that, you know, the best refinement that we're going to get is just not likely to provide the certainty that we would really love to have at this point in the process. And I mean, this is often the way it goes, is that we have to make a decision with what we have. And, you know, yes, I would really like to have a really solid sense of what the costs and what a design would be around the bowstring, but it doesn't really sound like the possibility of getting really clear on those details in a matter of 10 business days is really a possibility. The other thing is, to me, putting in infrastructure that has a switchback is a major compromise. And unless staff could tell me that there could be a way to put in a bowstring bridge that wouldn't have features like that, I don't know if I'm really that, yeah, I don't know, keen on putting a bunch of energy into a design that I mean, this is a piece of infrastructure that will serve the community for a very long time, and having something that is not as functional as what we have in front of us does not necessarily seem like the best approach to me. So does staff have complete certainty that a bowstring bridge would require some type of switchback or a modification to the ramps?
The mayor to Councilor McCollum, the switchbacks are certainly part of the discussion, but I mean, even if we reference like the slides where we show the bowstring or the Bailey Bridge, I mean, there's constructability concerns with some of these bridges, especially the bowstring, right? I mean, the picture on the right there is, I mean, I don't want to say that that's what it looks like on our site to construct that bridge. So even if the bridge comes back at a lower cost than the cable stayed bridge, it's possible that this is what we need to do in order to construct it, right? And there's the site is restricted, you know, either that's on the downtown side of the bridge or that's in Sims Park, right? So there's very real constructability concerns with the bowstring and the Bailey Bridge as well. So yeah, there's a cost element, but constructability is a real concern.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that.
All right, thanks, Councillor McCollum. And Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. I'd just like to add a few more considerations, that nuances to the discussion. Pending discussions with the federal granting regulator, we may be able to get an extension on the federal grant. That would have to be confirmed. I'd like to highlight that federal grant may have an opportunity to stack with additional grants. If we take a longer time to design a new bridge option and go to construction, and we'd still have to look at if that's even feasible, considering the timelines here. There may be an opportunity to pursue other grant opportunities or other funding sources. Further consideration, further nuances, I would also highlight the pricing we do have on the cable stay bridge, the 11.1. I'd like to remind council from the previous report that was pre-tariff pricing. How that may impact a future procurement process for a different style of bridge, we can only speculate at this time. There are a number of considerations that may influence future pricing for bridges or alternatives. Thank you.
Yeah, totally appreciate it. It's a bit of a Wild West out there right now in terms of predictability, for sure. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm in favor of reallocating our staff's time to do this work. I think it's worthwhile. It's a strategic priority of council and we want to get it right. And I would imagine that most of the community would want us to really understand that we're understanding the most detail as possible for the other options. So if it's 2 weeks of staff's time to do this work and we're hearing that it's potentially possible, I would be in support of that. And even if we come to have a council meeting in the last week of March to consider this and it doesn't make sense to go with another design option, I would still want to consider ways to reduce the total cost through growing communities funds. So I'd be curious to know also any impacts in the reallocation of unspent funds in that. I think that one thing that I'd be curious, because that money that has been unspent has been sitting in a account building interest. So we actually have built some interest over time for those unspent funds as well. So I think that brings me some ease in considering potential ways to reduce the costs by reallocating pre-assigned monies through growing communities funds. So I will just say that I'm in favor of assigning staff to do the work to bring back to council some further details on the other options, the Bowspring and the Bailey. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. And some of the pinch points, I'm certainly happy to call another meeting if that makes sense, especially if we're able to see how monies may be reallocated, or even, again, the lending terms changed to minimize that impact to the taxpayer for sure. But a couple of big challenges that we have in front of us, March 26th, which is would be with, and I think the time frame you mentioned, we do not have this room. It's going to be utilized for an RCMP event that's going to be happening that night that's been advertised, which is one challenge. And then the secondary challenge, besides my voice that doesn't want to work 100%, is we're right into spring break as well. And so that creates some logistical challenge in terms of trying to pull together another council meeting on such short notice. But to me at this point, the only way logically, without, and this is with 30 seconds of my brain turning away here, is maybe if it was a virtual meeting or something like that. But other than that, it might be quite difficult to do that. But having said that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Hilliard.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to acknowledge two pieces of public input that we've had. One is the presence in the chamber today of Mr. Harry Holland, who's been an advocate for this project since its origins 12, 13 years ago. And I think is no less an advocate today. So I just want to acknowledge Mr. Holland and appreciate his long-term advocacy and support. Secondly, we've had correspondence from the Cycling Coalition, who are in the last day or so, who are basically concerned about the fiscal prudence of this project based on the cost update. And I think their concern is certainly driven by a worry that such major cost escalation brings about controversy in the public eye, and perhaps lessens the support for active transportation in general. They're advocating that we revise this project and go to the other side of 5th Street and basically build a bridge into Lewis Park. I don't support that for the reasons that I stated earlier. I think that this project is tied to 6th Street because of the link to our active transportation system, and because of the huge redevelopment potential of that site. I think that the idea that it would somehow be a lot easier to do the construction in Lewis Park and do some type of bridge, whether this one or another one over there, that would be cheaper. Lord knows how long it would take to figure that out if we did agree to it, and what sort of cost escalation we would be looking at with tariffs. I think there are many reasons that I'm agreeing with Councillor Frisch that we stick with the plan that has been conceived and be prepared to pay the price, the political price for that in the eyes of our citizens, and recognizing that in the long term, this will be a huge asset for this city. And 20 years, 50 years from now, nobody will be worried about what it costs because of the new development that it unleashed and the benefit to the city that it brought about. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hillian, for that. And yeah, I mean, the support that I've heard from various organizations, downtown businesses, et cetera, has been quite overwhelming. And I would say those who've spoken against it are basically the same people who've spoken against it since I first heard about it. And again, just want to give a thanks to Harry, who, when I have had questions, he's answered the phone for me, and really appreciate discussing this project over the years. I do see Councillor Cole Hamilton online, so if you'd like to, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate all of the conversation. I see validity in many of the points that I'm hearing here. I do think that even if in the sort of 10 days prior to an end of March meeting, staff work has to be diverted to consider this, I think it's important to note that the sort of the current estimated price of the bowstring versus the cable stayed is $2.7 million. And while we may not be able to drill down as precisely as we would like on that other alternative, I think we should do the due diligence for the community and for ourselves to know that that the option we're pursuing is in all likelihood the most effective and the most cost efficient of the options that are available. So when it does come to, I know we're on receipt right now, when it does come to a resolution, I would like to move that that staff consider the least expensive of the options, the bowstring, which, as I said, other than the gradient entry point, is that's my only concern with it. But other than that, it's always been the option which I consider to be the most efficient use of our resources. So I would, it's only 2 weeks. I would like our staff to take an opportunity to review that, come back with their results, and then we can make an informed decision, as informed decision as we possibly can between the options that are available, given the relatively significant price spread between the final prices. So again, we're on receipt right now, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. Appreciate the comments. And Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just following up on those comments, I guess I mean, I would love to have more detailed information and a better sense, but from the way that I've interpreted the comments from staff, I'm not clear that if we push this back on staff and ask for more information on the bowstring, that we would be able to get enough certainty around a new cost for it, that we could make a decision one way or the other. So not to put the two of you on the spot here, but like, what could we expect in this short amount of time if we're asking you to come back and really get whatever information is possible around the bowstring? What kind of certainty? I know this is like, there's a number of variables here, but what could we expect if we push this off and have another council meeting in terms of what we'll be digesting at the next meeting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Councillor McCollum, through the CEO to Mayor and Council. Very, very minor increase in accuracy, I would say, on cost estimates. Wouldn't be I would struggle to say, call it a Class D. An incredible amount of design has gone into the current design, and even the detailed options. There was quite a bit of design work that went into the two that had detailed cost estimates prepared for those. It was not 10 days. It was much longer than that. What we could realistically come back with, it may be marginally better. As to council's level of comfort with the accuracy of the cost estimates and willingness to make a decision based on those, I'm not sure if that would be helpful in informing a decision going forward. That's for council to determine.
And I just want to reiterate the numbers that we see on the screen right now. To the left of $11.1 million is literally just taking that factor from that column and multiplying it. So those are not, and again, no disrespect, but they are not numbers to be trusted. And so to say that there's a $2.5 or $3 million difference between them, unfortunately, and I think you said, and not to have much confidence in it, but maybe you want to speak to that.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We simply don't know. We don't have the information. We don't have enough detailed design work done to complete a fulsome cost estimate to give a level of certainty similar to what we have for the cable state option. We may be able to get some better pricing on the Network Arch Bridge. The other two would be a bit further out because they weren't advanced quite as far. These numbers should be taken very much with a grain of salt, and I was almost hesitant to leave the decimal point off just because of lack of confidence and significant figures on it.
They look very official. So, but I really appreciate you articulating where our confidence level should be on those numbers. Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, we can appreciate the challenge with respect to this project. That's what we advised council early as soon as we were made aware of the result. And so we've been walking through this. We have financial plan discussions that have been gone forward. We also have to, again, balance our overall policy. This is a transformative community-centric project that would live on as a significant component of the redevelopment and vitalization of the downtown area. However, the costs are not lost on us. The policies that are behind the design are based on accessibility and council strategic priorities, and at the same time, the strategy to move forward was very successful with the federal government. We have no ability to project forward, but certainly, depending on council's direction, the benefits of this project, which attracted the largest active transportation grant across the country, we would presume would be attractive to others, and we would do our very best to try and leverage relationships and potential importance of this project for the entire region. So obviously the hands are now with council to have that deliberation, and council staff are here for additional questions if required.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks. I'm not going to make a motion right at this moment because I don't want to push things any faster than anyone else wants to move. So, but what I will say is that I suspect this bridge is going to be around for a lot more than 20 years, maybe 40, maybe 60, maybe longer. And if we take this number and we divide that over the number of years, it's going to seem like an insignificant number. You know, $4 million over even 40 years. I think the bridge is going to last a lot longer than 40, but it's like $100,000. You know, it's not a lot. So I know it's shocking at this point, but there's a lot of value to stay consistent in our plan and just to lean on our good decision making. We have a solid number, and the rest of it is merely conjecture at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. Councillor McCollum.
Okay, well, there's no other lights on, so I'm going to move the recommendation. Okay, but I wanted to make us, I wanted to actually first ask a question about the recommendation before I move it. Apologies. Because there has been discussion around moving the Growing Communities funding around, and do we need to provide that direction while we make this motion, because we're including a loan authorization for the 4.3 million, but from what I understand, we have 2 million that's allocated toward the East Side Fire Hall, and we could incorporate that into borrowing later to when we have, you know, when we've gotten further in that process. So I guess my question to staff is this the appropriate time to discuss that, or can we move the recommendation, then have a separate discussion around that funding piece?
I would recommend moving what's in front of you And then we come back with the loan authorization bylaw and the planned or the required amendments to the 2025 financial plan. That's the time to give the direction for alternate uses of funds for this project. Because currently council is just giving direction to include it. Then I come back with how we best go about doing that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. In that case, I'm going to move the recommendation. Thanks.
All right. And then when that comes back, options will be presented to council at that point. Any further questions or comments before I call the vote? All those in favor? And, Councillor Cole Hamilton, I see you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had hoped to, as I said, make an alternate recommendation prior. Well, I understand that we cannot get all the information we need on a bowstring bridge. I genuinely do feel that we owe it to the community and to ourselves to explore that other option. It's only a matter of 2 weeks to give our staff the opportunity to give us slightly more information on that and to make a choice between two options which connect east and west through a viable bridge. But just to explore that one opportunity. And I was really hoping for the opportunity to put forward that motion, but not being in the room, it's hard to know whose lights are on and when a motion's about to be put. But I find myself in the very reluctant position of wanting to see option 2 considered and not be in a position to do that. So I'll have to kind of, I guess, govern myself accordingly.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I won't be supporting this motion for the reasons I've stated previously, but I would just say that I think that there is consensus at the table that we want to see a bridge built that connects the east to the west for all the stated reasons. So I just want to reiterate that I'm in support of a bridge. I just would like to have more information before making a decision around the cost overruns for this project. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Jolicoeur. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Jolicoeur are opposed. All right. That being said, we're at 6 o'clock. We're going to take a break. We'll be back at about 6:25. All right, thanks everybody for standing by while we're having a quick break. And we just finished with our 6th Street Bridge project update, and we're now going to move into 4.3.1, our parcel tax review panel. And I'll pass it over to, maybe Mr. Garbett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a little post-lunch. Foggy.
Sorry.
Thanks, Council. Under 4.3.1 parcel tax review panel, we have a staff report and recommendation that council set the parcel tax review panel on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025 at 3 p.m. at the CVRD Civic Room at 770 Harmston Avenue. Is in front of council for recommendation. Mr. Langmeyer here is here if council has any questions about the parcel tax review panel for 2025.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And thanks, Councillor Frisch, for fixing your microphone for me.
No problem, Mayor. I just wanted to move the recommendation.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, and motion carries. All right, moving on to 4.4.1, the strategic cultural plan and implementation strategy adoption. And again, I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Council, we have some very exciting report in front of you, strategic cultural plan and implementation strategy for your consideration. Our manager of business administration, Joy Chan, is going to introduce the report and then pass to our director, Ms. Susie Saunders.
Just checking I have control of the slides. Okay, thank you. Thank you to the mayor, through council. Good afternoon. We are excited to present the final strategic cultural plan and implementation strategy for council's consideration for adoption. In this presentation, we'll be covering the community engagement highlights, the draft strategic cultural plan, the implementation strategy, and concluding with the recommendation from our staff report. The overview of the process, we commenced with phase 1, with the review of the city's strategic documents. Then there was a community engagement process based on the equity, diversity, and inclusion principles, which are aligned with the cardinal directions of the OCP. Next, we had in phase 3, the cultural facilities options analysis, economic and social impact analysis, and benchmarking work. Phase 4, draft vision and strategic directions is presented at a community check-in event. Then in phase 5, we released the draft plan to the public with a supporting survey, and also had in-person conversations with Indigenous serving community groups, core cultural partners. And so we are culminating these phases to which led to the final version of the strategic cultural plan, which we're presenting today. I'd like to highlight some of the community engagement work. We had an initial survey, which had approximately 700 responses. We also had targeted arts and groups roundtable discussions, one-on-one interviews, and discussions with arts and culture interest groups. We had 4 group conversations with equity priority groups, public drop-in event in this downtown summer market, community check-in event. Finally, an online survey, which had 78 responses at the time, and then finally concluding with conversations with Indigenous serving organizations, core cultural partners, and a final survey, which received 149 responses. The next slide shows what we heard from the final survey on the draft strategic cultural plan. 80 to 91% of respondents strongly agreed, or were neutral on the vision, the 5 goals and objectives. The commentary feedback is summarized in point form on the slide. With emphasis, there's a need for clear implementation plans, regional collaboration, and financial accountability for our next steps. Above is the summary of the community conversations we had. So we had a common recurring theme expressed through the Indigenous community members. Emphasis to ensure Indigenous engagement is carried out through a lens of cultural humility and cultural safety that is supported by city policies. importance of building relationships with Indigenous community members. This highlights the importance of a cultural coordinator position to dedicate the time to build relationships and establish trust. Staff also held a workshop with the core cultural partners at Cecil Williams Theatre. We have Richard Clark here present, joining us. Also the Courtenay and District Historical Museum Society, the Comox Valley Community Art Council, and the Comox Valley Art Gallery Society also were joined in the conversations. We explained to them how the plan can address some of their emerging needs, such as declining grant streams, impacts on rising inflation, outstanding requests for cultural facility expansion, and critical upgrades. There's also a clear consensus in how the downtown revitalization local area planning process will strengthen the Courtenay's downtown cultural district through infrastructure planning and investment. The engagement from the core cultural partners led to changes in the short-term, medium-term, and long-term cultural facilities options working document. We also had, if you want to look at the detailed descriptions of changes to the final plan, they are found in the staff report. So phase 5 engagement was considered in the final edits to the strategic cultural plan. However, it's important to note that when it comes to engagement with Indigenous members of our community, such as through Comox First Nation, the Mikisew Métis Association, Inuit, and Urban Indigenous Peoples, this strategic culture plan remained a living document. And now I'll turn it over to Director Saunders for the remainder of the presentation.
Thanks, Joy. Staff are very excited to be able to be here to share with you our final strategic cultural plan for your consideration. Culture Connects Us. This plan reflects almost 2 years of research, engagement, and development to bring us to a place where we're recommending Council's consideration of the adoption of the plan and the implementation strategy that'll guide the city's work in arts and culture over the next 10 years. The theme of Culture Connects Us was consistent throughout the development of the plan and reflects what is particularly unique to Courtenay in how residents and visitors alike view and experience arts and culture in our particular community. Residents shared how arts and culture bring people together to celebrate, share, and tackle some of our difficult topics and experiences. And the plan weaves this theme of connection throughout the recommendations and focuses on the potential of arts and culture to connect across diverse communities and interests. The vision of Courtenay's strategic cultural plan is Courtenay is a thriving cultural hub of creative opportunities dedicated to cultivating vibrant and inclusive arts and culture for residents and visitors alike. Culture and history of Indigenous peoples are interwoven into a diverse community where connection and resiliency are celebrated through artistic expression and cultural exchange. The strategic plan is broken into 5 goals as outlined on the slide before you and throughout the plan and staff report. These are the same goals that were articulated in the draft plan that Council received. Below each goal are their respective objectives, and then each objective is also associated with actions for a total of 59 actions outlined in the strategic cultural plan. So at a high level, the 5 goals are to advance truth and reconciliation through arts and culture, focusing on recognizing the roles and rights of Indigenous peoples, acknowledging Comox territory through visible arts and culture, and increasing support and investment in Indigenous arts and culture. A goal to build community resilience by using arts and culture to support community belonging and inclusion, celebrate diversity, and as a medium to engage on complex social challenges. To develop more accessible and affordable spaces by increasing availability and affordability, and prioritizing facility improvements and upgrades to enhance arts and culture space. Bolstering community arts through capacity building initiatives, increasing collaboration and networking, and awareness and support for community-led events. And supporting the strategic development of the sector, which focuses on the social and economic impacts of arts and culture, also as it relates to tourism, and specifically to Courtenay's downtown and municipal policy development. Fundamentally, to achieve the vision, goals, and objectives of the strategic cultural plan, the city must prioritize and focus on 5 foundational elements to build the capacity and groundwork necessary to advance the goals of the plan. As outlined on the slide, the foundational elements are advancing reconciliation across all initiatives, building the team to drive cultural change, elevating investment in arts and culture, transforming and expanding cultural spaces, and leading in regional cultural advocacy. These elements are an essential underpinning layer to the strategic cultural plan. They identify what will be required to direct the plan's vision into achievable goals. So the strategic cultural plan is made up of a number of documents that represents the significant work over the last 2 years. The strategic cultural plan itself includes the strategy, the What We Heard report, comparative analysis and review, including our benchmarking work, economic analysis, social impact analysis, and the cultural facilities options document. To accompany this very robust and long document, we developed a cultural plan summary, which focuses on the recommendations, goals, and actions. And then before you tonight, also the implementation strategy, which articulates the proposed approach to implementing the strategic cultural plan over the next 10 years. So to shift to speak to the implementation strategy, it uses a phased implementation approach to allow the goals and objectives to progress at different rates based on priorities and available resources. It's a methodology that focuses on implementation being sustainable and having the necessary resources and supports in place as we move through the actions. It's a bit different from other implementation strategies that are often time-bound. This is done not to avoid timelines, but to ensure that the actions build on each other, to make sure that the necessary steps, foundations, policies, and relationships are in place before we move on to the next piece of work. Each phase is guided by an overall priority, as seen on the slide. And then within each phase, the priorities for each goal of the strategic cultural plan are identified in order to then articulate the specific objectives and actions to achieve in each phase. So the priorities for each phase of work are in phase 1 to build foundations through establishing frameworks, policies, relationships, and resources to support long-term cultural development. This includes advocacy to the region for funding support. Phase 2 is around enhancing access and visibility by expanding programming, strengthening partnerships, increasing public engagement in the arts, and ensuring greater accessibility and representation. And phase 3 is where we envision achieving Courtenay's vision as a thriving cultural hub. And this is where arts and culture are integrated into city and regional planning, as well as economic and tourism development. An integrated phased approach may result in some goals and actions proceeding ahead of others in order to ensure, and this is done in order to ensure that the plan is adaptable and takes a measured approach that focuses on long-term sustainability. Part of developing the implementation strategy was to develop funding estimates for the actions as outlined in the plan. This slide and in the implementation strategy articulates the summary of the details. And as noted, the estimates in today's dollars are that the plan will cost over approximately 10 years, $230,000 in net new operating. So that total includes the culture and events coordinator position, which is in the city's proposed financial plan, as well as investments in Indigenous engagement and Indigenous arts and culture, and a proposed arts and culture grant program. It also estimates $650,000 in one-time funding for single projects or point-in-time actions, such as policy development, facility studies, capital planning, and public art. The funding summary doesn't identify funding sources, for instance, whether it's operating budgets, development-related funding, or grants. However, it does provide a sense of scale of the cost of implementing the plan as described. The financial summary is based on assuming that all actions are funded according to the recommendations. So if particular actions are not funded as they're presented in the financial plans, that could affect the costs of other actions. It's also important to note that not all of the actions of the plan will be directly delivered by the city. Many of the actions will be achieved through community capacity and partnerships. This could include some of the actions that are currently carried out by our core cultural service partners with our existing funding and relationships, potentially additional funding to our partners, or through our partners being able to leverage third-party funding as a result of the city's financial contributions and commitments. All costs associated with implementing the plan will be brought forward through the city's financial planning process for council's consideration at each budget process. The financial summary does not, however, include the cost of capital facility projects. While the strategic cultural plan includes a facilities options analysis and recommendations to consider specific facility improvements and developments, it did not include a costing of these projects as there remain too many variables at this time to provide accurate estimates. As such, the implementation strategy articulates how arts and cultural facility capital planning will occur in conjunction with the phased implementation. So this includes prioritizing the completion of facilities needs assessments and a cultural facilities capital plan in phase 1. These items are costed in the previous funding summary page. The result of this work will be a capital plan that articulates facility improvements and development priorities for phase 2 and 3. The cultural facilities plan will be brought back to council for your consideration and subsequent inclusion in the city's financial planning processes. The approach to capital planning ensures infrastructure planning and assessments support long-term cultural facility development and also supports the city and our cultural partners to advocate for and hopefully access third-party grant funding. Which brings us to staff's recommendation that council consider and approve the final strategic cultural plan as well as the implementation strategy. And Joy and I are here to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the presentation and the report. Really appreciate it. And I see Councillor McCullum has her light up.
Yeah, thanks for the report and the presentation. I found the implementation strategy particularly useful, especially the way it was broken down and fairly simple to see how each goal is structured in a continuous way with the 3 phases. I don't think I've seen an implementation plan laid out like that before, and I liked it. The question I had was just around the funding for it. It is maybe a little less than I was expecting in our previous discussions, and some of the operational expenses in phase 1, I think, are already funded in our this year's budget. So looking at the total that's outlined there, is that already included in our 5-year financial plan, or is some of that to be added now that we're considering the strategic cultural plan?
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor McCullum. The only thing currently in the financial plan is the culture and events coordinator position. No other costs associated with the plan have been included in the financial plan at this time.
Okay. And so in the next round of financial planning, fall 2025, will all of these be, because I mean, as you mentioned, there's not really a strict timeline on phase 2 and 3. So we'll bring in some of these one-time costs, and for phase 1, are we going to build in the rest of the pieces in kind of a 5-year horizon, or what are we imagining that we're going to do with that?
Through the mayor, Councillor McCollum, yes, we would look to start implementing or recommending the cost be included in the 5-year financial plan, both operating and capital. I should say, sorry, some of the costs will be in there. For instance, we had previously identified the need for a public art policy as well as a special events and hosting policy. So that policy development work, I believe, is already in the 5-year financial plan as special projects. So there are some things already included because those are recommendations from previous strategies of the city. Some of the other ones haven't been because they were really dependent on whether or not a culture and events coordinator position goes ahead, because there's a significant, hopefully, capacity in that role to do some of the work that would otherwise have to be outsourced. I want to articulate just that these are high-level estimates. We also thought, when we added it up, we're like, oh, it's not as expensive as we thought, but also the significant costs will come with capital and facility development. And we have been, as we do the development cost charges and ACC's amenity cost charges and other planning, and we are projecting those capital costs in there to ensure that we can capitalize on any development related funding to those projects. But a lot of the work is very much focused on relationships and partnerships, collaboration and capacity building. And that really takes a staff person working in partnership with community. And so that position should make a significant difference. And that's where we don't need to cost out each particular action because that staff person will form part of their function.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And you didn't highlight facility studies, but I think we do have some facility studies in our capital or work plan, maybe not the capital plan.
Correct.
So adding
Through the
on.
mayor to Councilor McCollum, we do. We have $75,000 for facility feasibility studies for the Sid Williams Museum and Center for the Arts, where the Art Gallery and Comox Valley Community Arts are located. That's a very small number for 3 facilities, but we are working with our partners and looking at federal funding for matching. There isn't funding currently in the plan for a cultural capital facilities plan, so that would be incorporated in a future financial plan for council's consideration.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for all that information.
Great, thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Years and years in the making. Really happy to see this. It took me a few times to get through it, and every time I got through it, I was curious and more curious. But really happy to see that the community really came forward to participate throughout the process. I got to attend one of the sessions. And I think we got some really valuable data here from both patrons of the arts, but also those who are working to support the arts. So yeah, really happy to see the hard data that we received from this. I'm actually curious if we can go back to the slide with the implementation plan costing. This one, yeah, thank you. So I appreciate Ms. Saunders, you just kind of highlighted some of the areas because I wanted confirmation on that too. I was like, I thought we approved money for that and gaming. And so I'm happy to see that. And that actually was one of the things that I felt really a lot of pride in that many of the actions within the cultural plan we've either taken action on or in the progress of taking action on. And so I wanted to just highlight that. And I guess my first line of questioning is around the funding, and in particular, I appreciated that the consultants worked to do a comparative benchmarking. I think they used Nelson, Langley, Squamish, and Camel River. And I think it's just I really want to spend some time on this because I think it's something that the Comox Valley and in particular the city of Courtenay and its residents can be quite proud of, which is that at least with these 5 municipalities, we, from the data in here, are supporting with the most amount financially. And so that to me, under arts and culture operating budget, and significantly under other funding sources for art and culture on the page 4 of that comparative jurisdiction. And so I guess my question as it relates to the fact that at least in what's being presented, we are already very much comparatively funding significantly compared to some of our colleagues in other municipalities. I think there's 4 actions I was able to find where it mentions grants under multiple pillars or goals. And I know that we've just recently shifted to the Comox Valley Community Foundation for our grants and aid. And so I'm wondering if staff have given any thought around that and a dollar amount. And I guess I'm just curious because we have my understanding is we already existingly, and it's through the report, we already support our cultural partners. And we also have service agreements for them. I think it highlights Comox Valley Arts, for example, to work with the city to advance art and culture administration and some of the policies. So I'm wondering if you can speak to how you see the potential, because it is mentioned in 4 actions, at least that I've been able to see, how you see that rolling out and how that might impact our existing funding structure.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Yes, one of the recommendations, and it's articulated in a few different places, is around the city contemplating a community-based arts and culture grant program. And so the sort of distinguishing factor there is we do fund the 4 core cultural partners in substantial ways. But we don't provide any funding outside of the grant and aid policy to community-based arts and culture or Indigenous-focused arts and culture. So there's really specific recommendations and a really clear call from the community to provide funding to that kind of community-based arts and culture activities, programs to support the implementation of the plan. In terms of how we go about developing that program and the amount of money that that might be, that's still some further work that we need to do to again, do a bit of benchmarking. What are similar municipalities providing? What does grant availability in our community look like? And where those sources of funds could come from. There's a number of options for that, but we're too early to say where that is. So what's included in the funding summary, I believe, is an estimate of about 50,000 a year for community arts and culture. It's just an estimate sort of based on Joy and I's knowledge and experience, but it needs to be tested and researched, and then the actual funding sources be articulated to council for your consideration, because it could be anything from taxation, possibly to gaming, possibly to other sources of revenue or funds. I just offer that one of the significant recommendations, and I know it's been a conversation with council, is around the regional funding support for the core cultural partners, because they provide such regional impact. And so that's one of the key actions in phase one, is to address that particular action. And so what that does to the tax funded portion of arts and culture from the city, if we were to be successful in having that be regionally funded, you know, that could be another opportunity for how funds are redirected or used. So we don't have a clear answer on what the source of funds is at this time, but it'll be coming back to council for consideration.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I do know that the CVR, the Comox Valley Regional District, does have community small grants, and I've participated in some of those activities, and a lot of them have to do with art and culture, including one just down the street from here around a little community mural. So I think our regional partner, without them knowing, they're supporting the arts and culture through one mechanism existingly. So yeah, happy to hear that we're going to be considering more direct action community art and continue to build our relationship with our existing partners. I guess my other question was around the facilities component, and which is at the end of the document. And so, yeah, it seems like the community has clearly articulated that we want everything that we don't have. It feels like there's like 9 or 10 things that we don't have, and I really appreciate the community articulating that. And in particular, I appreciate that there's been a prioritization exercise in those, being the studio theater, the outdoor performance space, and a large capacity performance venue. And so I'm just wondering, just to be clear, because I'm not sure I got the clarity when Councilor McCollum asked, but for those non-existing facilities, we still have to do detailed planning. We don't have that allocated in our 5-year financial plan. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councilor Jolicoeur, that's correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify on the priorities, and the options analysis does speak to this, and it was updated based on our conversations, both on the feedback through the draft cultural plan and also through our conversations with our 4 core cultural partners. One is to look at an online space finder. Before we start to invest in building new or additional capacity, we need to look at how we could actually make sure the capacity that we currently have is maximized. That was some of the feedback from the community, was finding available space, and of course affordable space is one step we can take that doesn't have capital costs. And then the other priorities would really be around the 4 core cultural facility, 3 cultural facilities for partners, because we have substantial city assets in the downtown core and already have cultural facilities that we really want to look at the programming needs and facility needs of those particular organizations and the ability of those buildings to meet some of the needs identified in the options analysis, and particularly also support the downtown and a cultural district downtown. And so this aligns also with our downtown local area plan and what's coming through in that initial feedback, really to support the vitalization of downtown. The large venue performance space was a clear community identified need. But the way it's articulated in the plan is as a visionary item. There's a lot of growth in the community that needs to occur first to be able to financially and economically even support a facility like that. And it would be a regional effort. The recommendations around the facility options are really focused on Courtenay. And of course, we could lead regional advocacy around a large performance venue. But there's a significant business case to be done around that to understand if the city and the region can economically support it anyways. And that's something that would probably be closer to the 10-year plus perspective. And so our focus is on what improvements can we make to current facilities and spaces to meet some of the needs that were identified. The studio theater is a whole new facility, but it's possible that, and I know the Sid Williams is looking at how they could potentially expand to include that as a part of the Sid Williams sort of as a facility. So those, just to clarify some of the priorities in those facility developments and planning. And so our focus will be facility needs assessment of our 3 cultural facilities and a capital plan for Courtenay facility, Courtenay owned and operated facilities.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolker and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah. Excuse me. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. I just briefly wanted to share my support for the goals specifically. Very reassured that you had such a huge turnout on the survey. 700 actually is pretty large number, and of course all the other engagement you did. And I'm actually really happy with how realistic you're being about the fiscal requirements of this and making sure that we take it in steps. So unless there are any other comments, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, it's been seconded. So thanks for that. And any further questions or comments before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right, and moving on to external reports of correspondence from the Comox Valley Pride Society. And there is a letter attached. And Mr. Garrett.
Through the Mayor and Council of.
Did I miss something?
Sorry, yeah, we have item 6.1.
Right. So I'm not doing that one. Slides missing. Aha, the missing slide.
Sorry,
so
through the Mayor, we're on item 5.1.
Yep.
And the topic in your agenda is requesting support dash Pride Society Comox Valley, and the recommendation that we have for council's consideration is that council provide a letter of support on behalf of the city of Courtenay for the Pride Society of the Comox Valley application to the local festivals. Oh, there we go. We're up front there. It's all good.
We fixed the computer.
Thank you very much. I was doing my best Ron Burgundy impression by just reading. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Garbett, for that introduction. And I think most of council are familiar with Pride Comox Valley, but I'll pass it over to Councillor McCall.
Yeah, I was just going to move the recommendation that council provide a letter of support on behalf of the city of Courtenay for the Pride Society of the Comox Valley's application to the local festivals, building communities through arts and heritage grant.
Second.
All right, I think there was some seconds there, so that I think staff captured that. And that being said, I don't believe there's any further comments, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries. All right, so now we'll move on to 6.1. Exactly. So don't worry, we got the computer wrangled now. So 6.1 Comox Valley Foundation Grant Community Winter Response and Storage Solutions, and I'll pass it back over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, just wanted to highlight that this information in front of council sort of continues the Team Comox Valley approach to pitching in and helping as we tackle some of these challenging issues. Ms. Saunders will speak to the briefing note under item 6.1.
Thank you through the mayor to council. Just here on behalf of our community development coordinator who couldn't be with us tonight. And just briefly wanted to inform council that the city has been awarded a grant from the Comox Valley Community Foundation of $28,500 to enhance community winter response and storage solutions for individuals experiencing homelessness. The city put in a grant application in partnership with the Coalition to End Homelessness late in the fall last year. And were successful and have received the funds and have started distributing them, which is great. And this is based on council's previous direction regarding storage support and storage solutions next door to Connect. So the grant consists of two pieces. One is the implementation or financial support for the implementation of the storage program next to the Connect Center. So it includes both funding for supplies and equipment, as well as paid peer support to support the operation of the storage over the term of the grant, which is for the next year. And the second component is to support the provision of essential winter gear and emergency supplies, including warm clothing and winter jackets. And so the city will enter into letters of agreement with the Comox Valley Transition Society, Indigenous Women Sharing Society, and Solid Peer Outreach to distribute these funds throughout the community. Happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And I think this really goes and speaks volumes in terms of the confidence with this grant, as well as one from the town of Comox, just in the effectiveness that the city has in terms of doing this type of work, going back, strengthening communities and the winter shelter strategy, all that stuff. The city has really risen to the occasion. I just want to really acknowledge staff and the hard work that you guys have done to get it to this point. With that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was going to say the same thing. I also just wanted to really highlight this is a perfect example of what happens when local government comes together in partnership with people with lived and living experience and experts in the field. I think it's a perfect example of partnership. Another great example of partnership between the city and our staff and community members and organizations. And I did want to just share, I was able to go down twice last week and wanted to just share that the feedback is overwhelmingly positive from individuals who are accessing the space and who are storing their belongings. I heard directly from individuals the benefit that that's had around simply just their dignity in being able to have a space that is theirs, the space that they feel safe to leave their things. Just to have space was one of the words that a woman I spoke to, especially with the weather we've had over the last few weeks. And I also wanted to just highlight and my appreciation for staff's work with the neighboring landowners and businesses to reduce any impact in the construction phase, but also heard directly from some of the neighboring businesses as well of some of the benefits of not having to engage with their patrons around some of the maybe unintended consequences of having belongings spread across larger areas, and this being a contained space is supporting those businesses as well. So I just wanted to share that and lift my hands up to staff. Thank you.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. Thanks for that. And we're going to move into council resolutions, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. And apologies for not being at the last meeting where the notice for this, but I'll just start off by reading and then I do have a few words. So the motion is titled Tariff Response, City of Courtenay joins Team Canada. Whereas the United States government is proposing to impose tariffs on Canadian imports, including a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods entering the US, except for energy resources, which face a 10% tariff. And whereas these tariffs may negatively impact Canadian businesses, industries, and workers, particularly those engaged in manufacturing, agriculture, forestry, and other export-driven sectors, leading to job losses and economic instability in communities such as Courtenay. And whereas supporting Canadian-made goods and services sustain local businesses, protects Canadian jobs, and strengthens the national economy in response to trade restrictions, and therefore be it resolved that the City of Courtenay encourage residents, businesses, and municipal departments to prioritize the purchase of Canadian-made goods and services whenever feasible. And be it further resolved that the City of Courtenay prioritize Canadian-made goods and services in current and upcoming municipal procurement and contracts, provided they meet financial and operational requirements. And be it further resolved that the city engage with the local business organizations, including the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce and the downtown Courtenay Business Improvement Area, to promote initiatives in supporting Canadian businesses and local employment. And be it further resolved that staff report back to council on the impacts of the above actions, and further that this resolution be shared with the Comox Valley local governments and Comox First Nation for consideration. And so obviously this is a ever evolving situation, and I drafted this in part in response to Prime Minister Trudeau's call to provincial governments, Canadians, and local government, and Premier Irby's call for local government to take action in support of the Team Canada approach in response to the U.S. Tariffs. So I know that lots of things have been changing over the last few weeks with this issue with the United States tariffs, but I really feel in conversation with businesses and community members that this is a small yet important action that we can take. And so, yeah, with that, I'm looking for a seconder. Thanks.
Excellent. I didn't want to mess with your flow.
Yeah, thanks.
Usually I'll get it seconded and then you get to speak
Sure.
to it, but you were very eloquent. So really appreciate that. And you know, the Team Canada, the Team BC, the Team Comox Valley, these are, I think, really important things. And yesterday I was able to attend a tariff task force meeting that was organized by UBCM with the Premier and ministers. We had an FCM event that actually, just to give credit, they actually reviewed this motion to make sure that it actually, from a legal compliance side of things, was on the up and up. And our local Chamber of Commerce this last week had their economic outlook breakfast that really had a focus on this. And so for the people who are out there, it is really all hands on deck. And I think it's also worth noting that I believe the first draft of this that I got from Councillor Jolicoeur was over a month ago. So it's definitely something that this council has been thinking about for some time. But as Councillor Jolicoeur said, it took a little bit to get it to this point. But really appreciate the effort of yourself and all those who have helped us get to this point. And I have Councillor Christian, and I do see Councillor Cole-Hamilton online.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was just going to speak in support of it and thank you for your leadership bringing it forward. I was also going to ask our city manager if he foresees any issues with any of these actions, capacity wise maybe, but yeah, I'll let him speak to it if he has any thoughts on it. Knowing that he's always willing to march right behind us of any case.
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you for the question. We assisted in the drafting of this tariff response motion with Councillor Jolicoeur. It reflects information that we're aware of across the country. Our staff have already started the process to examine it. I don't believe it'll be a challenge, and we have a few examples of reports coming forward from similar local governments in British Columbia that we can use as a template. One of the challenges, though, is that the completely uncertain nature of the matter at hand, which could change day over day, week over week, month over month over the next 4 years. So we'll do our very best to follow this direction, save and except for if we don't have any other options. But long way of saying we will come back and our Director of Financial Services is going to take the lead on that.
Yeah, thanks very much. And that is a good point that it's ever evolving. So we may have to revisit it every day, but thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And I think the other thing is that above everything else, I think one of the things that is highlighted and really got the whole country focused on is really reducing those interprovincial trade barriers. And so there's a real focus on that. So, I mean, really looking at those types of opportunities. Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I was on the same call as you were for UBCM, and one of the points that was made there, I guess that I made there, was that FCM has provided a legal opinion for use by all local governments in Canada, given there are like 5,000 different governments asking roughly the same question: how do we comply with international trade laws while still buying Canadian? I'm glad to know our staff have that in hand. And I also appreciate the attempt here to balance Buy Canadian with the need to keep procurement options like affordable. So I think it's a balanced resolution in keeping with the one at the regional district and many others across British Columbia. And yeah, I just want to thank Councillor Jolicoeur for introducing this to the council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Cole Hamilton. Sorry, I had a little bit of a cough there. All right, we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. All those in favor? And motion carries. And moving on to our bylaws for adoption, we'll start with our 2025 to 2029 financial plan, 3165-2025. Councillor Frisch.
Move adoption.
All right, any questions or comments? We had a pretty fulsome discussion about this finance, and again, just huge kudos to staff for the efforts that they've gotten us to this point. And actually, Councillor Jolicoeur, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just in reference to our conversation earlier tonight on the 6th Street Bridge, just for clarity from staff. So when the loan authorization bylaw comes forward, there'll also be a financial plan amendment if we move funds, if the will of council is to move funds from growing communities.
Mr. Lagenmeyer.
Yes, that's correct. So I have direction from council to work this into an amended budget. You know, the financial plan authorizes staff to spend. I think that's the tool for council to authorize spending. We have a new price for the 6th Street Bridge. We must bring it into the financial plan before we can actually spend up to the limit. So at the time when we're amending the financial plan that's in front of you today, we'll be bringing in the funding options with the preliminary, the debt, and some other options as we work through what we have available.
Excellent. Thanks for that clarity. Much appreciated. See no further questions. All those in favor? And motion carries. Moving on to 8.2, sewer service frontage tax amendment 3170, 2025. It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. It's been moved. I don't know if it got seconded, but given that we're just after 7, we'll maybe jump in to see if there's any council reports. I don't think we've done them for a while. Starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton, see a shaking head. Councillor Frisch, Councillor Hillian. Councillor Hillian, you're on.
Thanks, Mayor. I just think that we can't let it go by that there were 2 very significant events on the weekend. One was the point in time count by the Homeless Coalition, which I took part in. The other was the Comox Treaty vote, and it was a privilege to be part of both of those. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Both very significant. Absolutely. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was going to name one of those, so I'm glad you caught both. But I was going to also add in my new role with the as a council appointee to the Comox Valley Food Policy Council, just in reference to the tariff motion. The Food Policy Council is also taking action in regards to the tariffs in engaging in a Eat Local campaign. So I just wanted to share that with the public that you'll see an Eat Local campaign very soon for the Comox Valley. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. And Councillor McCollum. Excellent. Councillor Warren is going to pass because she is not here tonight. And I think I've already mentioned the tariff crisis meetings. Again, huge kudos to senior levels of government, FCM, UBCM, everybody coming together, including our Chamber of Commerce, like I said, for their economic outlook breakfast last week. So with that, Councillor Hillian. We are adjourned, and thanks so much. And we're just going to do a quick update. Oh, you got to go? Yeah. Councillor Cole Hamilton, we're just going to log out and back in. So if you wouldn't mind just rejoining, please, and thank you.
Okay,